Hello, dear student. Welcome to another video in psycholinguistics. Today we'll be talking about first and second language acquisition. Basically, we'll be talking about the theory of behaviorism. Now, learning has been defined in numerous ways by many different theories, researchers, educational practitioners. All the universal agreement on any single definition is non-existent. Many definitions employ common elements. So this means that there are a lot of theorists, researchers, linguists who uh, define language. Okay, however, their definitions have nothing in common. Okay, or at least uh, not that much. Okay, so each linguist defines a language in terms of their background and etc. So according to Shaw, as interpreted by Shank in 1991, learning is an enduring change in behavior or in the capacity to behave in a given fashion which results from practice or other forms of experience. Okay, so according to this definition, learning is an enduring change in behavior. Basically, uh, Shaw uh, relates learning to a change in behavior and capacity to behave, okay, which results from practice. So there is practice, there is change in behavior, okay, and experience. So these are the main key terms, keywords in this definition. Undoubtedly, some learning theorists will disagree on the definition of learning presented here. However, it is not the definition itself that separates a given theory from the rest, but the difference lies in their interpretation. So basically, it's not the definition that or the definition of language that separates a theory from one another, but their interpretation of the that is of the language, how they interpret this interpretation of the definitions to a given language or to language in general. So Shank 1991 lists 5 definitive questions that serve to distinguish each learning theory from the others. So we have here 7 questions. These 7 questions are the questions that distinguish a theory of language from another. Okay, we're going to see how each theory answers these questions. So the first question is how does learning occur? Which factors influence learning? What is the role of memory? How does transfer occur? What types of learning are best explained by the theory? What basic assumptions, principles of this theory are relevant to instructional design? And the last one is how should instruction be structured to facilitate learning? So each of these questions is answered from 3 distinct viewpoints. We're going to see how behaviorism answers these questions, okay? How this theory answers this question, how cognitivism answers this question, and constructivism. The first theory we begin with today is behaviorism. So how does learning occur according to behaviorism? So basically, behaviorism equates learning with changes in either the form or frequency of observable performance. Learning is accomplished when a proper response is demonstrated following the presentation of a specific environmental stimulus. So as we have seen in other modules, in schools of linguistics, in applied linguistics, behaviorism is always with this, or always equates learning with stimulus response, stimulus response, the famous stimulus response theory. Okay, so according to them, learning occurs through, responding to a certain stimuli that is provided by the environment. Okay, so for example, when presented with a math flashcard showing the equation 2 plus 4, the learner replies with the answer of 6. So behaviorism focuses on the importance of the consequence of those performances, that responses which are followed by reinforcement are more likely to occur in the future. So basically they provide with stimulus and then you answer 2 plus 4, that is stimulus. Your answer, so that's response, and this is how learning occur to this theory. So no attempt is made to determine the structure of a student's knowledge, nor to assess which mental processes it is necessary for them to use. So this definition of behaviorism to how, or this answer, or the behaviorism answer to how learning occur, does not talk about the mental processes that are at play when when learning a language. So it doesn't basically doesn't uh, provide us with anything about what occurs in the mind. Okay, so which factors influence learning? Although both learner and environmental factors are considered important by behaviorists, environmental conditions receive the greatest emphasis. So according to behaviorism, the emphasis is on the environment. Okay, the learner is also important, but not as much as environment. Okay, so behaviorists basically assist the learners to determine at what point to begin instruction, as well as to determine which reinforcers are most effective for a particular student. The most critical factor, however, is the arrangement of stimuli and consequences within the environment. So basically, the influence here, we have the factors that influence learning according to behaviorism are learner and environmental factors, the environment. However, the environment receives the greatest emphasis. Okay, great. So what is the role of memory in this? Okay, memory as commonly defined by the layman, so any person would define memory, is not typically addressed by behaviorists. Although the acquisition of habits is discussed, less attention is given as to how these habits are stored or recalled for future use. Forgetting is attributed to the non-use of a response over time. So basically, behaviorism does not give much importance, or in fact, it neglects. Okay, it neglects the memory. Okay, it neglects the role of memory. If you don't remember something, this forgetting words, etc., vocabulary, etc., means that you don't use the words, you don't use non-use of response, so you don't use the words, that's why you forget it. But how this forgetting occurs, and those words that you remember, where are they stored, etc., this notion of memory um, is not studied or uh, investigated on by this behaviorism theory. Now, how does transfer occur? So transfer refers to the application of learned knowledge in new ways or situations, as well as to how prior learning affects new learning. So in behavioral learning theories, transfer is a result of generalization. Situations involving identical or similar features allow behaviors to transfer across common elements. So basically, transfer, that is the transfer of prior knowledge in new situations, occur through generalization. So you generalize. When you have something new, when you learn something new that is very similar to what you have already learned, you generalize. So you generalize the rules, you generalize um, what you have learned in new situations. So this is how transfer occur according to uh, uh, this theory. This is how transfer occurs basically. It is when you have identical features between what you have already learned and what you are going to learn in the future. That is, when you have these similarities, transfer occurs through generalization. For example, the student who has learned to recognize and classify alum trees. Okay, alum trees is a certain type of trees. Demonstrates transfer when he or she classifies maple trees using the same process. When you see, when you learn about elm trees, and then you see another type of tree which is maple tree, because these trees are, for example, are similar. So the similarities between the elm and maple trees allow the learner to apply the previous elm tree classification learning experience to the maple tree classification task. So if we see, for example, a tree, okay, you have an image of a tree, then you see another tree. If they are similar, so you classify them as uh, one type of of a tree. So for example, okay, this 19.2, sorry, 29 here is a mistake, so you can take that off, just a spelling mistake. So what types of learning are best explained by this theory? Behaviorists attempt to prescribe strategies that are most useful for building and strengthening stimulus response associations, including the use of instructional cues, practice, and reinforcement. So we're going to see how or what types of learning are best explained. So these prescriptions have generally been proven reliable and effective in facilitating learning that involves discriminations, recording facts, for example, generalization like defining and illustrating concepts, associations like applying explanations, and chaining like automatically performing a specific procedure. However, it is generally agreed that behavioral principles cannot adequately explain the acquisition of higher level skills or those that require a greater depth in processing, language development, problem solving, generating critical thinking. Okay? So this theory does not explain how learning occurs when you learn something that is abstract, something that requires a high level of skills. Okay. Uh, so what basic assumptions, what are the principles of this theory that are relevant to instructional design? An emphasis on producing observable and measurable outcomes in students, that is, behavioral objectives, task analysis, criterion, reference assessment. Okay, these are the principles. Okay, so we have pre-assessment of student to determine where instruction should begin. So according to behaviorism, a teacher or a facilitator should first pre-assess the student to see where the learning should begin, because the learning should be based on what they have already learned. Okay, should be close. Emphasis on measuring emphasis on mastering early steps before progressing to more complex levels of performance, sequencing of instructional presentation, mastery learning. So we start with what is simple and then you move gradually to what is complex. Okay, use of reinforcement to impact performance. Okay, how? Use, for example, tangible rewards. Use something that is tangible. Informative feedback. So reinforcement is very important according to this theory. Use of cues, shaping and practice to ensure a strong stimulus response association. For example, simple to complex sequence of practice. Use of prompts. So we use cues and prompts to make this relation between stimulus and response strong, so that the students can respond properly. How should instruction be structured? So the goal of instruction for the behaviorist is to elicit the desired response from the learner who is presented with a target stimulus. So therefore, to facilitate the linking of stimulus response pairs, instruction frequently uses cues. So the use of cues to initially prompt the delivery of the response. And reinforcement. So we have cues and reinforcement. Okay, so cues, we use them to prompt the delivery of the response. Reinforcement, we use them to strengthen correct responding in the presence of the target stimulus. Behavioral theories imply that the job of the teacher or designer is to what? Determine which cues can elicit the desired response. So the teacher should know which cues that can elicit the desired response. Arrange practice situations in which prompts are paired with the target stimuli that initially have no eliciting power, but which will be expected to elicit the response in the natural performance setting. So we should arrange practice situations that can help students to, elicit so that can help students and elicit the response, the proper response. We have arrange environmental conditions so that students can make the correct responses in the presence of those target stimuli and receive reinforcements for those responses. So we use environmental conditions. Okay, this also helps students to elicit, or helps to elicit the proper correct response from the students in the presence of the target stimuli. Thank you very much for your attention. This is it for behaviorism, and catch you guys in the next video.